Making a game is hard. It requires many skills and a lot of time. But you know what's harder? Making a game till the end and putting it out. I'm Simone from Yellow Zero Games, and today I want to show you how I made my game from scratch to publishing in 4 months. Let's start from talking a little about my game, Minuto Galactic Deliveries, and why I'm making this video. Minuto is a small mobile free-to-play puzzle game, where you are the cute rabbit Minuto. He has the mission of delivering vegetables and stuff to people in the galaxy, but he has very few resources, so he has to split his spaceship to fulfill his customers' requirements. Of course, they cannot notice he's using this trick, so all the ships have to arrive at the same moment. The crux of the puzzle is to trace a path from point A to point B that allows Minuto to reach the customer with the correct amount of ships. It has 60 levels, cute pixel graphics, cute characters, and a little lore hidden in the dialogues. As I stated before, I made it last summer after being laid off. I had a 3 months notice and I basically used it to make this game. I had an idea for this puzzle many years ago, but I never made more than a prototype. Now I had an opportunity for making a small game, a lot of free time, and the need of putting something in my curriculum. This video is mostly for myself, since I just want to put myself out there, make a post-mortem of what went right and what went wrong, and just give myself a high five. What you are hopefully gonna get is an overview in the life of someone that managed to put at least one game out, which, by the way, for me, was the most difficult part. The video is split in parts, and they should be quite unrelated to each other. So, if you don't care about something, you can just skip to the correct chapter. So, let's start from my background. I developed stuff since I was a teenager. My very first attempt at doing anything was a Pokemon parody made in RPG Maker. I always wanted to make games, and I slowly started making stuff. I started so many projects, all with one thing in common. I never finished anything. It's so frustrating to have so much unfinished stuff and then, oh, what do you like to do? I like making games. Ah, something I can try? So I started working in some more remunerative area of developing, and I'm now 9 years into mobile development. I worked as a programming teacher for kids, one of the best experiences of my life, and I also had a couple of courses on game programming. But I did make something. I have a demo of a game called Searing, now on Steam. We're a small team of 6 people, and I'm one of the developers. I'm not gonna dwell a lot on this, because this is not really the point of the video, but Searing is definitely something that shaped me as a developer. Since I started in 2018, I became a better developer and developed my Unity skills. And even if the demo is out, I could not scratch the feeling that I did not release a game. So it was time to take from my idea list my most doable idea, and I had to do it in 3 months. I had to make a couple of decisions before starting making something. The only thing I had prior to the production of Minuto was the idea of the puzzle and a couple of the levels. I had a little prototype years ago, so I decided to make an horizontal slice of the game before asking my friends and family to try it again. An horizontal slice is somewhat the opposite of a demo. If a demo is a very polished version of a small part of the game, like the complete first level or the first hour of gameplay, an horizontal slice is a less polished version of the whole game, start to finish. They have different values. A demo, or a vertical slice, is useful to generate interest or demonstrate how a specific mechanic or part of a game feels, while an horizontal slice is more about giving the full feeling of a game, and it shows if the whole experience might work. Therefore, I decided to start from designing on Photoshop every single visible view in the game. The menus, the levels, the dialogues. I decided to do everything from the beginning because I suffer a lot from choice anxiety, and without a roadmap and a specific what should I do today, I just kind of panic. If I have the full game in mind first, it's a bit more under control. Of course, I continuously go and change details back on the full game file, And this is not really possible for bigger games. It might be possible on a smaller scale. If you have, for example, a big game split in 4 macro areas, maybe you can do these only in one area. Also, you might have noticed that everything is very pixel arty. Everything is done with the hope of being both achievable and polished. For example, I wanted to have a nice round number of levels, 100. But that didn't really add anything to the polish of the game, and would have used a lot of my time. Pixel art is not the easiest form of art, but is, for me, the one that allows me to have something that looks polished with the least effort. I hope this does not come across as I made a low-effort game on purpose, but more like I optimized my effort. Regarding the UI, we are talking about a mobile game, and my expertise is mobile apps. So I do know a little about mobile interfaces. But I did not know about pixel art, so I had to learn a bit. As everything in life, I just followed a couple of YouTube tutorials and got a little better each time.
Fix the collar, button up, tighten up, you're ready to go.
I tried to find a balance between what skills I had to learn and what I had to delegate. You will see in the marketing section that maybe I chose wrong for some of them. But yeah, even if I'm a programmer, I decided to do for myself the interface, the game design, the project management, the publishing, and the marketing, and some of the art. I realized that it was a bit too much for me, so I did delegate music and the other part of the art. I asked for help from my friends Marco and Lolly, who respectively do the music and the art from Searing. They were amazing, and honestly, a good 50% of the charm of Minuto goes to their skill. Finally, I needed to decide for the theme of the game. Since it's a puzzle game, the story and the setting can be whatever you want, and I could have made a minimalistic game with no characters. But I feel that having a story, little characters, a theme, dialogues, gives you more tools to work with. I'm not saying that minimalism is bad, I'm the opposite. I'm saying that to pull it off, it requires so much more effort. So I decided to go with my rabbit, Biscotto. I mean, it's not a theme, it's just the idea of having a rabbit protagonist. The rest came from the mechanics. Why would you need to trace a line from A to B? Maybe you are a Pony Express, and that's the route to a customer. And why would a rabbit be a Pony Express? That's ridiculous. Unless it's a space rabbit. And from there, I developed the rest of the story and the lore. These were all the ingredients needed to make a game. Now, let's bake it. Initially, I was going to talk about the code here, but really I don't see a lot of value in it. I can either be too technical and fast, but would not be very interesting, or talk about some basics, but that would be very long and actually not really relevant to Minuto. If you want a video on what I used, what patterns I used, the code structure, I can think of something. So I will use this section of the video to talk about how I organized myself to keep track of the progress. So, more than coding, this is project management. First, a list of micro tasks. I wrote on a piece of paper everything that I think needs to be done to complete the programming of the full game. Very broad strokes, something like 10 bullet points. This is not an easy task, and of course these points will change with time. But the idea is that if I cross off all these points, the game is 100% done. For Minuto, these tasks were: make the ship go through a drawn line, levels actions like erase, undo, obstacles, win conditions and lose conditions, design all levels, level navigation screen, gift system, write all the dialogues, title screen, boss battles, others. You can see how there's nothing about graphics or music, like implement the graphics, because those are cross-task tasks. The music is everywhere, the graphics are everywhere, and both can be added at any point. I know that I will have to do those things eventually, but they are not a macro task, but something to be added later. All of this is very flimsy. These are not rules. It's just my method that seems to work enough for me. Anyways, I drafted these micro tasks on a piece of paper, leave some space in between them, and then I leave this piece of paper on my desk. Then I take the one that sparks the most joy, and I proceed to... Pretty clearly, these tasks are just giants that cannot be tackled as is. Make the ship go through a drawn line contains so much information. What ship? What line? What does drawn mean? What I have to do is to make micro tasks out of this, and simply this means to think what are the smallest steps needed to make this step. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing now, just the first step. In this case, the steps go on a different piece of paper. I color-coded the new piece of paper and the original line and keep this on my desk. This task will be split at the very least in: put a ship on the screen, create a grid of dots, create a line renderer to show a line, detect the press on a dot, start tracing the line, stop tracing if you are on a dot, put a button to play the level, detect if the ship is on a dot, detect if the dot has a starting line, animate the ship going from A to B. This is probably not even complete, and it might need a lot of tinkering, but it gives us a starting point to be relieved from the choice paralysis, which I called choice anxiety before. I meant choice paralysis. Start working from the first of the mini tasks. Program at a steady pace, try not to write spaghetti code, but also don't dwell too much on over-engineering. That will come later. Of course, it is not going to be shiny and perfect and cool, but in my experience, an ugly thing that works helps me a little bit more than a beautiful thing that doesn't. It's important to have a little schedule. For me, something flexible works better than something set in stone. But again, I'm just describing my method. I wake up pretty late and I like working later in the day. So I just like to start working after lunch and continue until dinner. And then I continue a little bit after dinner. Please, this is not advice. It's just what works for me. My psychologist literally told me this is not healthy, so I can. The important part of this is having a schedule you're confident of. Know yourself, and if you don't function well later, work earlier. Choose an amount of micro tasks you feel good with. And it's fine if you don't reach that number at the end of the day. I'm saying this out loud more for convincing myself than convincing you. While you write code, I mentioned that you should not care too much about the quality of the code. It's a strong statement, and don't write a complete mess of a code. Think 1 minute when you do something new to see if you're gonna use it in some other part of the game, and you can make a more general system instead of a single-use thing. I'll explain what I do with segments in Minuto, since it's a big part of the game. A segment is a line between 2 points. I think 1 minute about the structure of the code. Every level has many lines, so I'll make a segment class which holds the two values, start and end. And a trace class, which is a collection of many segments. Therefore, I make the segment a class that basically holds data, while the trace is going to give me the list of the segments and manage to add them in a way that is legal for the rules of the game. Well, this was my 1 minute before starting coding thoughts. I started and things are going smoothly, and then a couple of things started adding up. First of all, a segment does not have a starting point and an ending point. It just has 2 points. Start and end of course work, but there was a lot of code repetition. If the segment start touches the start of another segment, or the end of another segment, or the segment's ends touches the start of another segment, or the end of another segment, this is not readable code. This is very ugly. And it's so because the concept of start and end is wrong. So I would transform everywhere in the code in which I say start and end with what I decided to call gamma and theta. since A and B or alpha and beta would still have the same idea. It's something I came up with. It's not a rule, it's just something that gives me the opportunity of understanding well what the 2 points are. Whatever tool you're using to code should help you changing the names of the variables. And then I go and check their usage in the code to see if these checks make still sense. I therefore created a little system that allows me to check both endpoints at the same time, so I don't have to ask all the possible combination between start and end. The other thing that came evident only after working on it is that the class trace is a monster class. It means that it contains the segments, the data of the segments, the information on how to display them, so the rendering, and the recognizer of the touch input, and the responsibility of tracing a new segment when the screen is touched. This class is doing too many things, two unrelated things. And this is a code smell. A code smell is something that you're gonna get with time, and you can catch them early, and in this case, split this class in multiple classes. One is a trace renderer, one is a trace gesture listener that is gonna listen to the input, and the other one is the trace that we know that contains all the segments. It works in the same way, but it's much easier to navigate. Having a lot of files can be a bit daunting, but it is better than having one single file with 2,000 lines. All of this just to say, don't be afraid of refactoring the code. Change the structure of the code while you work. I'm talking, of course, as a solo developer, so I don't have to communicate these things to other people. But it's still better than being afraid of breaking something if I change something in the code. On how to write better code and recognize if something is not working, I have to give you the worst possible answer. Study and experience. Make a lot of games, maybe finish them instead of doing like me, and study from books, courses, YouTube tutorials. If something that is conceptually simple is starting to become a burden to make, then the whole code that you wrote is making simple stuff difficult, and with time it adds up. That's the moment you have to stop and start rethinking. It has to be thought through, of course. I'm not saying to improvise. You do need a plan. But if there are a couple of days or weeks you sense something is wrong, if you forgot a macro task, if the structure of the code gives you a hard time, then it's time to change the plan a little bit. Add macro tasks if needed, move things around, change your schedule. Don't be fixed on the initial plan because 100% that plan is not going to work. Last thing, feature creep is planning's worst enemy, and you should have a solid idea on what the game is going to be before starting. In Minuto, I wanted to add a different type of obstacles, 100 levels, and some other things that came up mid-development. It's important to have the restraint to think, this is not needed. If I really want it, I can always add it later. Different thing is if you change things because of the user's feedback. We're gonna talk about feedback a little later. These are all the rules that I followed, and the writing of the game was ups and downs, but mostly fun. I dread not seeing the end of the tunnel, so these rules help me to have the dopamine of the little task without the dread of, oh my god, I will never finish this. The most difficult part was being constant, because you will have some days in which the dopamine is not enough. That's part of the process. Now you have a game. What do you do with it? Do you press the release to the public button? Of course, I skipped the very important parts of the development process in the previous chapters. Testing, social media, and marketing. These have to be done during the development. In my experience with Minuto, they are the main thing. Or at least they felt so because I'm not very good at them. Let's take them one by one. The game has to be tried by other people. If you played more than 3 games in your life, you probably thought at least once, this could have been tested better. But testing is expensive, is time-consuming, and is frustrating, because people are going to say mean stuff about your baby. But without testing, people are going to say mean stuff about your baby after you release it, where it's gonna be so much more difficult to fix and gain their trust again. So, Grab a group of consensual friends and family. Make a couple of Telegram, WhatsApp, Discord groups, whatever they prefer, and tell them, hey, I'm making a game. Can I bother you every couple of weeks and try something? This was my approach because I really don't like bothering people, and people online can be definitely more straightforward, but they have much less on the line. You cannot really have a constant income of feedback with them. I am lucky enough to be part of a group of friends from forums online. Forums died, but we remained friends, and honestly that gave me a very lucky opportunity of having an initial tester base. These initial testers will help you define if there is something fundamentally wrong with the game. In Minuto, the order of the levels of the tutorial were very off. People did not understand at all what they had to do. It's better to fix some fundamentals during development, instead of when you have a game that is almost already done. Later, when you are gonna have a consistent horizontal slice tested by your inner testers, I think it's okay to start expanding a bit. Asking people online, Facebook, Reddit groups, Discords, and such. Finally, all of these are to keep the expenses at a minimum. There are other paid ways to achieve better testing, but this video is on how to make a video game on a budget. Therefore, next! This is my least favorite part of game development. Next! Now okay, let's talk about it, but I want to preface it by saying this. I really am not good at this. I don't like it, and this whole video is about how I made Minuto, and it's not a collection of suggestions. This chapter that I have to talk about is the one in which my advice is to do something different than I did. Social media is a mutating beast, so googling how to make social media marketing really is a bit useless for me. Not useless, it gives you an idea, but it changes so often that there is no guide to success. I mean, that's why social media managers and game marketeers exist. First of all, I started very late. I know you're supposed to start as soon as you have something, but I was not feeling very confident about it, so I waited for the last month. I made a plan of 2 to 3 TikToks every week for the full month before the alleged release date. And I started making TikToks using the most final graphics. Of course, some changed, but I just put all my TikTok ideas into a file and then spent a couple of weekends doing only that. It was a big chore. I felt like I'm a game programmer, I should program. I really didn't talk about the target audience in this video because I really didn't study it that much. Maybe this was one of the main errors. Finally, I wanted to send a press release to press and influencers. I made a trailer, a little website with a lot of info, and then I wrote a nice mail template. And then started googling every possible influencer and press that does mobile games and puzzle games. I got a list of 75 emails and websites, and then just sent my press release to all of them. Only a couple answered, but the first page of Google was full of my game. I don't know how many downloads eventually that brought. It's a bit difficult to track, but it was a pretty big boost in confidence. All in all, marketing takes a lot of effort, and for me personally, it takes the most effort. It's difficult to stay constant, be relevant, and honestly, it was constantly on my mind. Here, I guess I ask you, the viewer, if you have any tips on doing this, especially when you hate it. Until now, we only talk about organic marketing, but I did spend some money for this project. The first is Facebook and Instagram ads. Also here, I had a little bit of experience, but the results were not stellar. I made a triplet of ads. One was a little trailer, one was a series of dialogues, and the last one was one of those annoying ads in which the guy cannot solve the puzzle and gets annoyed. I spent €100 in total on them, and of course the one that performed the best is the annoying one. So if you got that ad in your feed, I'm sorry, it's the one that works best. Here's a nice graph that shows the number of store page views when the ads were active, and then dropping the moment in which the ads finished. So it does something. I don't think that the value for money was worth it though, but I do know of cases in which it was. I also spent a bit of money on TikTok to promote one of my videos. It did make that single TikTok explode, but it did not convert in almost any followers. So again, the value for money was not that great. Some influencer that I contacted in the previous step also asked for a sponsor segment, and honestly, for the next time, I'll think about it. This time, I really couldn't afford it. I would have loved to have found smaller influencers and dedicate a bigger budget, split between 10 micro-influencers, then have all the budget to only one, because I really didn't want to risk it. But it's very difficult to find micro-influencers in the correct niche. My method was literally Googling people, and of course, only the bigger ones show up. Again, if you have any advice to find small influencers, I'm all ears. Since we are talking about money, let's talk about monetization. The monetization model for Minuto is free-to-play with optional ads and donations. I personally don't really enjoy intrusive ads in games. I say it like someone does. I decided to integrate them behind the hint functionality. So they're optional. The problem is that that particular feature is the exact functionality that is the least used by my target audience, puzzle players. Anyways, it sounds a bit cheesy to say, but I did not make Minuto for the money, but because I wanted to put something out. So if I get some money out of it, that's cool. But in the early stages of becoming a game dev, I think that focusing on the money might lead to a couple of mistakes. I've been an app developer since I was 21, so navigating the process of publishing an app is familiar territory to me. Let's break it down. Also, it's nice. Publishing on the Google Play Store costs a one-time fee of $25, while on the App Store it's $100 per year. The rest involves compiling various forms and mastering the intricacies of the app stores. Both involve a fair bit of bureaucracy, which always gives me a little worry, but it's manageable. Finally, the moment arrives when we can hit the release button. After 4 months of dedicated effort, we built a modest audience, garnered some PR, and have a completed and thoroughly tested game. Honestly, reaching this point was the most exciting part, independently on the result. It's the realization of, hey, I'm a game developer. That's very cool. But you are here for the results, so here we are. Since its release, Minuto has garnered a total of 292 downloads. In terms of profit, we earned $34 from donations and $10 from ads, bringing the grand total to $44. Of course, these are not stellar results from a money point of view. The monetization was not the focus, so I'm fine with these numbers. But the downloads are a bit less than expected, honestly. I'm trying to think what my mistakes might have been, and I have some clear ideas. My budget was quite small for a non-organic growth, and my organic reach was very little as well. I talked a lot about delegation, and since marketing and social media are not my forte, maybe I should have worked on delegating that. But you know, I had a little budget and a bit of anxiety, so it's difficult to find the correct balance. But thinking only about the mistakes is a mistake as well. I should equally focus on the wins. Firstly, realistically, my first published game was not going to be financially viable. Much of the game's success comes from marketing, an area that I know very little about. And I'm still impressed that 290 people cared enough to download it and play it and donate. Secondly, did I hear myself? I published a game in just 4 months. How cool is that? Lastly, I've gained so much knowledge and confidence. Spoiler alert, I'm working on my next game, and I believe that I'm progressing at double the speed I was doing with Minuto, especially on the coding front. I also want to address that I didn't talk about the fact that I'm tracking my players on what they're doing while they play. I have the data such as how many levels were beaten, around what levels the player dropped the game, how many people beat the secret bosses, but I don't really know what to do about it, except looking at it and admiring it. I'm also posting some TikToks without a real schedule, and I'm checking the data from time to time. It is allegedly very important, but I don't have a lot of ideas. So, if there is one takeaway from my experience, it's this. If you have the opportunity to make a game, just go for it. Use your skills, keep the scope manageable, play to your strength, and delegate tasks you can handle or learn, and add them to your skill set. Then, the most difficult part, take the leap and publish it. Whether it's a PC game, you can do it for free on itch.io, or an app, which you can do it for cheap on Google Play. Thanks people for watching until here. This is my first long format video, so any feedback is greatly appreciated. You can follow me on all the socials as Yellow Seahorse Games. You can download Minuto on App Stores and Google Play through the links in descriptions. And if you want to support me, you can find a link in descriptions as well to my coffee. See you next time!